your points or objectives from the nouns when you're teaching. For example, for God so loved the world. What's the subject there? The nouns there, the object or the subject there is God's love. So you build your points around, if you're going to use John 3:16, you build your points around the love of God. Okay. That's how you build your points or your outlines. Okay. When you are teaching or preaching and you're structuring the lesson, find out what the subject is, and the subject is generally the nouns, proper names, places, ideas. You build your points. For example, let's turn to John 3:16. Therefore, the word so there is an adjective. It describes how God loved. He so loved. And the word gave is a verb. All right. Give an example of something giving. An application. That gives it life. See, very simple. Very simple. Build your points around the nouns and the subject. Build your illustrations around the verbs and the adjectives. Nothing else is left in the sentence. You have nouns, verbs. Now you have predicates, objects, and participles. That's fine. But participles can be dropped out of it. They just add language. But the nouns, the verbs, and the adjectives are the impact of the message. Thank you. Once you build your points around the nouns and the subject, you got the structure. When you come back, what does it say about God's love? He so loved. What did he do? He gave.